Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on Women Have Needs Too. Today, women have needs too, and right now, I need to learn more about human trafficking and the organization called Created. Today, we have with us today Jillian Penhale from Created, the executive director from Created, and it's based out of Tampa, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And everything that you do is locally to Tampa.
Yeah, there is also a Created that's in the Gainesville area that we partner with. But everything, our outreaches, our residential home, everything is really based in the Tampa area.
All right, so first of all, tell us what Created does.
Yes.
And what is their mission?
Yeah, Created serves women who have experienced human trafficking and sexual exploitation. Our mission is to meet the women where they're at and help them find their beauty, value, and dignity. And so we do that in a lot of different ways. One is through our outreach services. So we have teams of staff and volunteers that go out on Friday nights and meet women who are trapped in street prostitution, who are being trafficked in that area, and then also in strip clubs in our city, and also brothels, which are fronted as massage parlors and lingerie shops is what they're called in Tampa. So we have teams that go out, and really our goal for outreach is just to let women know we have a place for you. So when you're ready or when you need help, here's the number that you can call, and we'll give you whatever resources that we have for you and whatever you need. And then we also have emergency housing and other housing programs that when they are ready to take those next steps, we can offer that wraparound services and say, yes, we have a safe bed for you tonight. Yes, we can start helping you find a new job. And yes, we can also provide mental health services, and all of those kind of things.
That's amazing. It's jaw-dropping to me that you have people that are going out on the streets and B, going into the strip parlors. I mean, they just let you in?
They do, and we actually get that question a lot. The reality is, I think the one thing that we've all had to learn about the sex industry as a whole is the women are totally replaceable to them. And so they don't, like with us coming in, they don't really see us as a threat. They kind of just think like, look at these crazy church ladies is what a lot of the strip clubs call us. They call us church ladies. They're like, look at these crazy church ladies. Like they just think in their mind, we're not making an impact because we're not going to shut them down.
It's not going to hurt them at all because there's 10 more women waiting to
Which
get
for
in.
us, it's like every single woman that we talk to and every single phone call that we're able to make after and follow up, like that's what matters. So even though we might not be shutting down a club or anything like that when we go in, we know that it's every single life that matters, and to give her that opportunity and to know that there's more for your life and there's other things that you can do. That's really our goal.
It reminds me of that starfish story where the kid is, there's a beach full of starfish and the little kid's going on the beach and throwing them back in the water. And an adult comes up to him and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm saving the starfish." And the adult says, "Well, there's millions of them on the beach. There's no way you can save them all." And the little kid says, "But I saved that one."
Exactly.
Yeah. And so when you go into these brothels and strip clubs, they're not just walking out the door with you.
Correct. And we actually, statistics kind of show that it takes 7 to 8 times of meeting someone and kind of building that trust before she even starts to open up in conversation.
Right.
So I think that's one thing that's also really important is we always have to remember as volunteers and as our teams going in is like, these women have been surviving for so long, so they have so many walls built up. They don't have a lot of trust of other women or people in general.
Right.
And so it does take a long time to really build that trust. And so really by our consistency and continuing to meet them where they're at, eventually they start to ask questions and they start to engage some of our resources. Like one is that we have on Nebraska Avenue, we run a drop-in center and women can come in there and get clothing and toiletries, and that's where we have volunteers and staff set up to really have that conversation of like, well, what is your need? Are you ready for housing? Are you ready for a next step? And so as we have those conversations, they can kind of opt into what they're ready for. But it does take a while to build that trust, for sure.
I can imagine, because they probably live in a world of distrust.
Yes.
So when they actually get the nerves, well, I want to ask another question too. In your research and in your work that you do, What have you found? What are the reasons that the women do end up on the street or end up in a strip club or brothel?
Yeah, so the average age of entry into prostitution and exploitation is actually 13 years old.
Oh my God.
So for majority of the women that we serve, so we serve women over 18, and what we see in our outreaches is women who are above 18. A lot of that is because, for many of our women, they have a common story of abuse as children, and just being taught that, this is something that they could do, and then as they get older, they're vulnerable to traffickers who come in and say like, well, you've already been abused, but now I'm going to pay you for it. And so those are common things that kind of like, it's just the different situations that the women have gone through in their life and through their childhood a lot of times just kind of leads into more vulnerable situations. And so there is no like one place where like, well, that can say like, oh, well, it's for women that are from this area or women that are like, class or anything. But like it can, like definitely anybody that is vulnerable, especially emotionally. A lot of the traffickers, they put themselves as their boyfriend. And so it's a trusted person that the women are, believing in that then starts to tell them like, oh, well, because you're living with me, now you have to do this for us to stay here. Or, convincing the women that like, I love you. And if you love me, well, then you'll do this for me. You'll go be out in Nebraska and all the money that you make, you'll bring it back to me. And so it's just really those vulnerabilities. But it is really a common thread, for the women that we meet through our outreaches and the ones that have come through our programs that like this all started somewhere in childhood. With just the messages that they were receiving and also the abuse that they experienced and also many being sold as children. And then, as they grow up, it just becomes, what their normal is.
They don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah, and there's no way to get out of it until they're able to kind of break that cycle. Sometimes the thing that breaks that is getting arrested and having some time in jail where they can figure out what their options are. Sometimes it's being sent to a treatment center and they're able to look into some more options too. But unless there's people that can give them a support system that like can help walk them through the healing process, it's very hard to exit on your own.
I can understand that. So when they pick up the phone or come in and say, I'm ready, I need help, this is what I need, what happens then? What do you do to help them? So
normally the two kind of questions that we have to ask all the women when they say they're ready is getting a drug treatment evaluation and a mental health evaluation to make sure, because for many of our women, a lot of times their abusers and their traffickers use drugs to keep them completely compliant. Yeah. So addiction is a huge part of the work that we do. So sometimes it is getting women into a detox bed and letting them detox, and then they can move into our emergency housing. That's usually about 3 to 4 days. Then we can get them a bed in one of our emergency housing programs. Also with mental health, to survive, a lot of our women have mental health issues that have come out of being trafficked, dissociative identity disorder and different things. So making sure that they have the resources to help them is really important. And then once we kind of assess those things, we can offer them a safe place. So we have a program that's on our main property where we have 6 beds right now. Women can come in there and live for up to 90 days. It's usually about 30 days is really the length of stay. And while they're in that emergency housing program, which we actually are trying to change language to just safe housing, because it is something like our goal in that program is just to provide safety and security while they figure out what they want their next steps to be. So whether that's applying to go into a longer term like program or environment where they can have support to walk them through the next steps, or if they want to get a job and try to get independent living, try to get in one of their an apartment, those are also options. And so we kind of walk through both of those steps.
And education?
Education, yeah. So all of our women in that safe housing program, all of the women kind of decide on one of those two kind of options. So either she's applying for longer term housing, so we help her do applications. We have a longer term program that we call the Sanctuary, where women can live for up to 2 years. And so some of our women go from emergency housing into the Sanctuary program. But we also partner with other homes that are similar to ours in the area and across the nation. There's never enough beds, unfortunately. And then for that, for the job and safe housing, if a woman just wants to try to get a job, we'll help her get her resume together, start applying at different jobs, and then let her stay until she kind of builds up enough income to move into a safe housing apartment.
And you have rules at your house.
We do, yes.
Yeah.
All the women have to abide by a curfew. I mean, there's certain rules for living. Obviously, nobody can. It's a safe house, so no men or anything like that are allowed to come onto the property. And even in that emergency housing, visitation is very limited.
Right.
But yeah, all of our rules are really just to create a structure of accountability.
Right.
So that the women are kind of, learning the things that they'll need to implement themselves to stay safe and to know what a safe person is and to know what good boundaries are.
Yeah, love it. So we're going to watch a video, but before we watch the video, I would like you to talk about some facts and numbers of what's going on in maybe the Tampa Bay area, the Florida area, and across the country as far as human trafficking. Because I think a lot of people they're aware that there's something going on, but they really don't understand the impact that it's having.
Yeah. So human trafficking as a whole is, I think the last thing I read, which it's probably updated, is like over $25 billion industry in itself.
It's the largest. Humans are the largest commodity in the world.
Yeah, which an unfortunate way that people explain that is that if you think about drugs or even those type of things that can be traded illegally. People can only get high off that once, but with a woman or a person, they reuse that over and over again. And I mean, one of the statistics is that, for the average human trafficking victim, they're forced to for sexual trafficking, they're forced to have sex up to 20 times a day, 7 days a week. And the average life expectancy for a child that's being trafficked is only 7 years. They don't actually have statistics for
the lifespan.
Adult. It's about 7 years. So once they're brought into human trafficking, versus when they could possibly die is about 7 years.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and a lot of that, I mean, it's just, drugs and abuse and all of those things. And so in the Tampa area, Tampa is actually third in the nation, according to an organization called Polaris, for the amount of people that are brought into a city for the purposes of human trafficking. We also recently, there was a report done that was kind of counting up the illicit massage parlors throughout the nation, and we're number 3rd in the country as well for the number of illicit massage parlors in a city. And then, of course, Tampa itself, we're known as for the adult entertainment industry. We have more strip clubs per capita than any other city in the U.S. Is something that people say a lot.
You would think Vegas, New York.
Yeah, and so
Chicago,
and I'm sure that they're all up there as well. Yeah, and a lot of that, I know from some of our donors who are in the business world, they say like when they travel, that's one of the first things that people comment on. And when they say they're from Tampa, is like, oh yeah, where Mons Venus is, or like one of the other strip clubs. So it's definitely something that we're known for. And I always say, when it comes to that piece of it, of like being known for that industry with strip clubs, it's like, well, if we're known for that, imagine all of the things that are happening like under that, because strip clubs in Tampa are legal, so they're legal businesses that are operating. But there's always so much activity that goes along with that. I've never been in a club where there's not something else going on, or where the women aren't telling us that there's more going on.
And now we have Super Bowl coming up.
Yes, and so Super Bowl, as I'm sure many people have heard, year to year, women, wherever the Super Bowl is located, and it's not just the Super Bowl, it's any large sporting event, any just large national conference. When something comes to Tampa, women are brought in for that event. So we are expecting.
How do they get them in? How come we can't stop it from happening?
There's multiple ways that people are brought in. I mean, from Tampa to Atlanta is a really huge, the 75 corridor is a really huge way.
So they're driving them in?
Yeah, so driving is a lot. I mean, flying. And really it is just, trying to, and I know Tampa has been working really hard to build task force and things that are trying to figure out, okay, we know that this is going to happen, so our police departments are all working together to coordinate rescues and do things like that. So that's actually been the one thing that's been, I think, as an organization, it's been really great to see our city come together and try to figure out like how we know this is going to happen. So how are we going to combat it and say like not in Tampa?
I've seen a lot of articles written about it lately.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and watch the video. And why don't you set up the video for our viewers?
Yeah, so this video is actually 3 different graduates from our residential program, the Sanctuary. So like I mentioned before, women can spend up to 2 years in this program just working through their process of healing and recovery. And to graduate, they have to have stable income and stable housing. So we help them, get job skills, get a job, and then establish their own safe housing. And so that's the program that these women have graduated from.
All right, let's roll the clip.
My name is Jennifer. I grew up in Plant City, Florida.
My name is Jasmine. I grew up here in Tampa, Florida.
My name is Shania. I grew up in Silver Springs.
My mom went through like a lot of domestic violence with her ex-husband. I did good in school, and me and my brothers were like very close, but we did see like, the violence. We went to the spring shelter, when it was time for us to flee. They basically told my mom to pick a place on the map, and she pointed to Pueblo, Colorado, and that's where we ended up.
I started kind of sneaking out with the neighborhood kids, and it was just the thing to do to kind of walk around the lake and smoke cigarettes. So my stepdad at the time, I guess him and my mom had thought that maybe other things were going on. And so he had the talk with me, and it was more than a talk. This was the man who raised me from the time I was like 4.5 until, 13.
My older brother was just neglected and abused by my father and just mistreated from my mother's boyfriends. And so he really tortured me. I used to get bullied and beat up and put alcohol on my bruises. And, he was sexually abused, so it rubbed off on me. We both were sexually abused.
My first sexual abuse was when I was 4. Not my mom's ex-husband, but a boyfriend of hers at the time. Shortly after that, I started like acting out in school, with like my male teachers and just like seeking like all of this, attention. And, I also grew up without my father. So I don't know if like not having my father and then the abuse that I was experiencing like made me feel like loved and cared for,
At 15 years old, my at the time boyfriend traded me to a drug dealer, and I was then raped multiple times, where he was paid a certain amount for the time he had with me. And even later on, I wound up marrying this person and stayed with him for 20 years.
I realized I had 2 different personalities. I was Shania, and then when I would get back in my sinful nature, I was Isabella. I would hoard or stuff away who I didn't want to look at or what I didn't want to see. And when I became that person, it was like it was a puppet. I became a puppet.
I hung out with like older people, and there were older men who, wanted to have sex with me and were willing to pay me to do it. There were a couple times, where I would be sexually assaulted.
I became cold and numb and just careless for myself and others because I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to feel because it hurt too much to feel.
I had gotten a year clean, and then I had gotten my kids back, and then I relapsed, and I knew that like if I didn't go get help, like I was gonna be right back where I was.
I was incarcerated for a short time, and I was given the opportunity to get out on just like short-term probation, and I denied that, and I asked to go to Created.
When I went to Created, I could see that they genuinely loved me. And I didn't know why, because everyone else abandoned me. And the one thing I was fascinated is like, they never forced me to love Christ. They only expressed how he loved me.
I thought I was gonna be a drug addict, prostitute for the rest of my life. And the program really saved my life. from the moment that I got there, like I just felt like security, you know, like I didn't have to worry about how I was going to eat. I didn't have to worry about where I was going to sleep. And just from the moment that I got there, they just loved me, you know, until I could love myself.
If Isabella was sitting next to you, what would you say to her?
I was in such chaos. I thought that she'll get through it. That you'd get through it.
Hold on. Things will change.
I would just say that, you know, there's hope and things will get better and things will be different. You know, she's capable.
I remember when I was talking to God and I was about to commit suicide, and that's when I fed him. You know, it was just so, because I seen him in them. I seen how they loved me. And it was so beautiful. So I knew he was real. I knew that he was real by the way that they loved me. He's my beloved. He's my savior. He's my hero. He's my healer. He's the reason why I'm here today.
God calls me his daughter. As lonely as I've always felt, like no matter how hard things may get, I'm never alone. Like he's always there. He's everywhere.
The name Jasmine means gift from God.
My name Shania means God is gracious. It's awesome.
It's so impactful. It just, I keep going back in my mind what you said about the life expectancy from once a child gets into it. It's 7 years. And first of all, they've been robbed of their childhood and, you know, eventually they're robbed of their life. And it's just so sad. And, you know, what a blessing to have an organization like yours that has helped these 3 women, but have helped. How many women do you think have come through your program?
Oh, that's a really good question. So we serve an average of 89 women a week in a given week. I would say from graduation from our programs, that's just through all of our programs. So when our outreaches are happening and our residential programs, we can house up to, right now we're at about 16 women at a time between the emergency housing and the residential.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, our graduation, I think we're at over 180 have come through the sanctuary home.
And
but
then
that's in the
graduated out of
12
the
years that we've been in existence.
right.
Yes. Not all have graduated, but just have started, like at least walked into the doors of the sanctuary program. Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. And then how many, well, we don't have to go to that number, but so let's talk about your upcoming projects. And it's got to cost a lot of money to run an organization like this. You have a lot going on.
Yeah, we do. Our operating budget is at about $600,000 right now. So one thing, and also the majority of that goes directly to our program. We don't have a very high admin or fundraising cost.
Right.
And so it does. I mean, when I talk about like the sanctuary or emergency housing, like that comes along with case managers that have to be there and be the support person and be the advocate for the women. For our outreaches, we have team members who have to like coordinate those and get those together. Also all the supplies, because one thing for the outreaches, our way in and the way to kind of start the conversations with the women is always a gift. So we have to have something to give them, which we usually, it's toiletries and things like that can start a conversation, but also be something that they need.
Yeah.
And then of course, you know, keeping the electric on for the houses and the water bill and all
Just
that.
that alone.
So there's so much that goes into it.
Well, where do you get your funding? Is there a government program for that, or?
There are some. We get them. We actually don't have any current government funding. We have had a grant in the past year just from Hillsborough County, which that was directly for COVID response. So they
Okay.
wanted to get as many people kind of in safe housing off the street while back in March and April. So we were able to put women in hotel rooms, up to 10
wow.
rooms at a time.
Nice.
So that was great. And we actually learned a lot from that experience. And we currently have funding to keep 6 rooms available for emergency needs. And so majority of our funding actually comes from grants that we apply for. So we apply at different foundations and things like that. But also probably about a good 65% of our yearly income is just individual donors. A lot of them give at our yearly fundraiser that we have, but really it's those individual donors that keep us afloat and keep us going.
How can somebody get involved with Created, or excuse me, if they don't live in this area?
Yeah.
You know, because we have people watching from all over. What can they do to get involved in their local area?
Yeah, that's
or
a really good
nationally,
question. Yeah,
internationally?
I mean, I would say, if you're someone who wants to like get in the fight and like, be boots on the ground, I would definitely look up. I think almost every state at this point has local task force within the issue of human trafficking. You can usually find those through your state government's website that can start naming some of the organizations and places that are involved in those task force. But I would definitely recommend that. And I always recommend like doing a community search of like, okay, well, what's happening with this issue in, Oklahoma or wherever
Right.
it is that you live.
Right.
And so that's definitely one with Created. I mean, we always have needs that people can help with. Some of the things that we have had volunteers do that aren't living in Tampa is more of an admin type of thing, like helping respond to emails or doing things for our website, things like that. Always, of course, just becoming a supporter of our work and just praying for us as well. But I would definitely always recommend, luckily so Created's been in Tampa for 13 years. In that 13 years, we've seen so much growth in the awareness and education about human trafficking. And with that has brought a lot of new organizations and a lot of people that are interested in getting the fight. So I'm sure there's something happening close to where you are.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I had a question for you, and I can't even remember what it was. But I do wanted to ask you how oh my gosh, what was the dang question? It just totally, I was so into what you were saying, I totally forgot what I was going to ask you. Let me see if, you said local task force. I can't even think of it. So one thing I wanted everybody to know is that a portion of all my proceeds goes to Created. And you're going home with the shirt today. So if you go to the website, womenhaveneeds2.com, and you purchase something, a portion of those proceeds will go to Created. I wanted to talk to you about the cupcakes, because I think it's so cool that the cupcakes, that a lot of times when the women go into the strip clubs, they're going in with cupcakes, and you would think, oh, why would they want a cupcake? But but it's really used as a warming tool just to get in the door and get them to open up.
Yeah, it is. And I think with all of our outreaches, we bring something really kind of as an offering of like a way to build trust and a conversation starter. So we have a great group of volunteers that provides cupcakes to our team every month. And so we take those into the clubs that we go into. And honestly, the women, like, they expect them at this point.
Right,
so it's
that's
always
funny.
like, some of them call us the church ladies, some call us the cupcake ladies. But it is. It's like a peace offering.
That's funny.
And just to say, like, here's something for you, and like have a conversation. But yeah, it is really just a way to kind of like break kind of some of those barriers down.
I remember what I was going to talk about. So over the summer, I just happened to meet this individual. It was a I don't know, a woman in her 30s or so, and we got to talking about Created, and she had two different cousins that were abducted, and were on the trafficking path because they had abducted her. They kept her phone so they could send messages back to the family that started to become worried about her, because one of them had a kid, and the parents knew that there was no way they would leave the child behind. She went on an interview for a job, and the interview was in this basement. It was up in Michigan somewhere, and the second part, she went in for the interview, and then they said the second part of the interview, she had to go meet somebody that was down in the basement.
Wow, yeah.
And once she got in the basement, that's when they drugged her. Well, she was a user already, but they didn't know that. So she didn't get impacted by what they had injected into her, whatever it was, as much as they thought. So she ended up being able to get out of the situation. No, that one didn't get out of the situation. Somebody else that got out of the situation. But they had gotten her to California. She was a day short of being on a boat, but the FBI was already on it.
Wow.
So my point of telling you this whole story is it could happen to anyone. You just have to be careful what you're doing and be aware of your surroundings and check out situations.
Yeah.
But what kind of advice do you have for women who, are vulnerable? I mean,
Yeah.
we have young girls going to nightclubs on Friday and Saturday nights, not so much as now with the COVID, but still going out and still walking from their car to and from their car late at night.
Yeah, that's a really cool question. And honestly, research shows that the two most common lies that traffickers use to kind of really trick women into this lifestyle. One is the promise of employment, and the other is in promise of like housing or like a new life. So I think those are kind of the language to watch for as women, of just like, because like obviously in that situation it was like an employment opportunity.
Right.
But definitely like if you are looking for a job and just always background checking that job, making sure it's legitimate, making sure you know where they operate from, all of those type of things. And then of course with the promise of like a new life or like starting over, I think it's just like, a lot of the common just ways that, the men, as I mentioned, it's a lot of times the boyfriend. And so somebody who's making false promises and things like that. So I think it's just, as women, to just kind of always have like our radar up with those type of things. And it's true, it can happen to anyone. The majority, and while people can definitely be abducted and things like that, the majority of trafficking happens with a close personal, somebody that you know. So somebody that you're in a relationship with, a parent, just different things like that. So, I mean, all can happen though. So I think it is just, being kind of being an investigator ourselves to know, like, if we're concerned about a situation that we're walking into, to trust our gut and, kind of be aware. Yeah.
And I hear they prey on naivety, right?
Well, yeah, they're looking for vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and I've heard of them going into college campuses and going into the cafeterias.
Oh, okay,
Is
I
this
haven't
true?
heard that.
Okay, so yeah, I heard they like go into these college campus cafeterias, and they're looking for the girl who's just finished her lunch or doesn't really know, maybe she's on a food thing, and promising them, like you said, a job, a better life.
Totally.
Yeah, and
I mean, I've heard something similar where like they've had situations where traffickers are hanging out in malls or things like that, and it's looking for that
clubs.
Vulnerability. They're looking for somebody who's by themselves, who maybe seems like they would be open to a conversation, or like, and I think in general, they probably talk to maybe a bunch of women that day, but it's the one person who kind of like is vulnerable and like needs and is looking for some comfort or something. And so I think they definitely do prey on those vulnerabilities. But again, there's just so many ways that trafficking kind of looks in our society, unfortunately.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for being with us today, Jillian. I hope it's opened the eyes of some people that are, not as familiar with it. And, when I watched the movie Taken, that's when I'm like, oh my gosh, this is happening. And that was a while ago. And since then, I've wanted to do something, you know. So thank you so much. And I can't wait to start. This is one of the shirts that's on the website, so you have to check it out. Women Have Needs Too. Right now, I need chocolate. So if you have a chocolate fetish or know someone who does, that might be a good shirt. But there are other shirts on there too. And a portion of all the proceeds will go to Created. So thank you, Jillian.
Yeah.
Women Have Needs Too. Right now, I need to maybe get involved with human trafficking and fighting human trafficking and learn more about Created and human trafficking itself. Thank you, Jillian. Everybody have a great day.